1:23 a.m. Eastern Pacific. Coast Guard Tactical Law Enforcement Team spots unusual vessel activity 380 miles off Colombian coast. 3 cargo ships, 7 fishing trawlers, 2 oil tankers, all stationary in open ocean with no legitimate reason to be there. Thermal imaging reveals 340 personnel transferring cargo between vessels under cover of darkness. No port, no dock, no infrastructure. Just 12 vessels conducting industrial-scale narcotics exchange in middle of Pacific Ocean. The floating drug hub operating beyond any nation's territorial waters. The cartel innovation that took 4 years to detect. The operation U.S. forces dismantled in 72 hours. Welcome to Warfare Signal, where we expose the operations hiding in plain sight. Eastern Pacific, November 2024. Venezuelan cartels evolved beyond traditional smuggling routes. Coast Guard patrols increased. DEA surveillance intensified. Port inspections became sophisticated. Traditional land routes faced unprecedented interdiction. The solution: eliminate infrastructure entirely. Operate at sea where no jurisdiction applies. Transfer cocaine between vessels 400 miles from nearest land. The narco-navy operating mobile distribution hub that appears and disappears like ghost. This is transnational crime adapted to maritime domain. The detection came from unexpected source. National Reconnaissance Office satellite monitoring commercial shipping for different purpose notice pattern. 15 vessels meeting at same coordinates every 11 days, staying stationary for 6-8 hours, then dispersing to different ports across hemisphere. Too regular to be coincidence, too organized to be legitimate commerce. Intelligence fusion began immediately. NSA analyzed ship communications. CIA activated human sources in Colombian ports. DEA cross-referenced vessel ownership. Coast Guard deployed patrol aircraft for visual confirmation. What they found exceeded worst estimates. November 3rd, P3. Orion Maritime Patrol aircraft overflew coordinates during scheduled transit. Forward-looking infrared camera revealed thermal signatures of 340 people moving between vessels. Cargo being transferred from fishing trawlers to container ships. No lights, no AIS transponders active, no legitimate reason for this activity. The floating transfer station operating in international waters beyond legal jurisdiction. What's your assessment of this cartel innovation? Type A if maritime law can stop this. Type B if international waters protect narco operations. The logistics were sophisticated beyond typical cartel operations. Venezuelan fishing fleet departed Puerto Cabello with cocaine loads distributed across 7 trawlers. Average cargo per vessel, 4.2 tons hidden in fish holds modified with false bottoms. Total payload, 29.4 tons moving as apparently legitimate fishing fleet. Transit time to rendezvous point, 14 hours at 12 knots. No suspicious behavior. Regular fishing fleet heading to productive waters. Meanwhile, container ships departed Santos, Brazil, and Callao, Peru with legitimate cargo and empty space in select containers. Oil tankers from Panama with ballast tanks partially empty. All vessels converging on coordinates 380 miles offshore. The convergence that happens every 11 days like clockwork. At rendezvous point, Venezuelan trawlers transferred cocaine to container ships and tankers. Industrial-scale operation with cranes, hoists, and coordinated logistics. 34 tons of cocaine moved from fishing vessels to commercial ships in 6 hours. Then dispersal. Container ships headed to Los Angeles and Houston. Tankers to New Orleans and Miami. Fishing trawlers returned to Venezuelan waters. All vessels separating with no obvious connection. The drug distribution masquerading as routine maritime commerce. Stay with me, because the operational sophistication gets more impressive. Venezuelan cartel recruited maritime logistics experts. Former merchant marine officers planned routes. Ex-naval personnel coordinated transfers. Professional crane operators supervised cargo movement. This wasn't street-level operation. This was industrial corporation conducting offshore business. Security measures matched legitimate commercial standards. Lookout vessels positioned 50 miles from hub providing early warning. Encrypted satellite communications coordinated timing. Weather forecasting determined optimal transfer windows. The professionalism that made detection nearly impossible. And the legal protection was elegant. International waters. No port facility. No territorial jurisdiction. Even if detected, which nation prosecutes crime occurring 400 miles from any coastline? The legal gray zone where maritime law becomes ambiguous. But November 7th convergence had uninvited observer. USS Gabrielle Giffords, Independence-class littoral combat ship, positioned 80 miles from rendezvous after Coast Guard intelligence briefing. MH-60S helicopter airborne with Coast Guard tactical law enforcement team embarked. The interdiction force that would end floating hub's operations. Command decision came from Joint Interagency Task Force South. Can't prosecute in international waters. Can't board vessels without flag state permission. Can't arrest personnel beyond territorial jurisdiction. Solution: make the logistics impossible. Disrupt every transfer. Board every vessel separately. Force dispersal before cocaine changes hands. The strategy that exploits maritime law rather than fights it. What would you do commanding this interdiction force? Comment your tactical approach below. November 7th, 2:47 a.m. USS Gabrielle Giffords activated all radar systems. Flooded electromagnetic spectrum with targeting signatures. Made naval presence unmistakably obvious. The subtle approach gave way to overwhelming show of force. Venezuelan Cartel's lookout vessels detected military radar immediately. Emergency communications went out. Transfer operations halted. Vessels prepared to scatter. But USS Gabrielle Giffords wasn't alone. Coast Guard cutter Stratton approached from west. USCGC James, Legend-class cutter, from east. 2 Coast Guard patrol boats from north. P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft overhead with camera pods recording everything. The coordinated response that turned open ocean into surveillance grid. Boarding teams deployed simultaneously. Coast Guard law enforcement detachments trained for vessel interdiction. Armed with M4 carbines, equipped with portable drug testing kits. Authorized under international maritime law to board vessels suspected of narcotics trafficking. 12 vessels, 5 boarding teams. Simultaneous interdiction executed with precision that shocked cartel operators. First vessel boarded, Venezuelan fishing trawler MV Esperanza. Crew attempted to dump cargo overboard. Coast Guard team observed 200-kilogram cocaine bales hitting water. Under maritime law, dumping narcotics constitutes admission of guilt. Captain detained, crew detained, vessel seized as instrument of drug trafficking. Second vessel, container ship MV Atlantic Horizon, Panamanian registry, legitimate cargo of electronics from Brazil, but one container had unusual weight distribution. Boarding team opened container, found 4.7 tons of cocaine concealed among electronics shipment. Crew claimed ignorance. Ship's manifest falsified. Financial records showed payment to container's shipper traced to Venezuelan Shell Corporation. The paper trail connecting legitimate commerce to narco-trafficking. Third vessel through 12th vessel. Similar discoveries. Some attempting to flee. Others stopping reluctantly. All found with cocaine loads or evidence of transfer operations. None able to escape Coast Guard cutters with superior speed. The coordinated interdiction capturing entire floating hub in single operation. Total seizure from November 7th operation, 27.3 tons of cocaine. Street value, $2.1 billion. 12 vessels detained, 340 personnel arrested. The largest maritime drug bust in Eastern Pacific history. But physical seizure was only first phase. If you're following this investigation into transnational maritime crime, subscribe to Warfare Signal. We break down the operation's mainstream coverage misses. DEA immediately began financial investigation. Shell corporations owning vessels traced to Venezuelan Ministry of Interior. Satellite phone records showed communications with known cartel leaders. Banking transactions revealed payment structures involving Venezuelan military officers. The evidence connecting floating hub to state-sponsored trafficking network. But prosecution faced jurisdictional nightmares. Vessels seized in international waters. Crew members from 7 different countries. No single nation clearly responsible for prosecution. Maritime law requires flag state consent for criminal proceedings. Panama refused to prosecute crew of Panamanian-flagged vessels. Venezuela denied any involvement. Colombia claimed insufficient jurisdiction. Brazil wouldn't accept transferred prisoners. The legal complexity protecting narco-traffickers operating between jurisdictions. U.S. solution. Prosecute everyone under continuing criminal enterprise statutes. Charge conspiracy to import narcotics into United States. Claim jurisdiction based on cocaine's intended destination rather than seizure location. Legal strategy tested in multiple courts, eventually upheld. 217 defendants prosecuted in U.S. federal courts across Florida, Texas, and California. But convictions don't solve strategic problem. Cartel operated floating hub for 4 years before detection. How many transfers succeeded during that time? How much cocaine reached American streets? Intelligence analysis estimated 140 successful transfer operations, each moving average 30 tons. Total cocaine potentially distributed 4,200 tons over 4 years. Street value, $324 billion. The interdiction success that came 4 years too late. Was this operation a strategic victory or tactical success masking strategic failure? Share your assessment in the comments. The November 7th interdiction revealed cartel innovation evolved faster than counter-narcotics response. Traditional smuggling used go-fast boats. Coast Guard adapted with faster interceptors. Cartels switched to semi-submersibles. Coast Guard deployed better detection systems. Cartels moved to container ships. Customs enhanced port inspection. Every adaptation met with counter-adaptation. Floating transfer hub represented next evolution. No land infrastructure to raid. No ports to monitor. No fixed facilities to surveil. Just mobile hub appearing and disappearing in vast ocean. And international waters provided legal protection. Traditional smuggling routes lacked. Counter-narcotics forces faced hard reality. Ocean is too large to patrol comprehensively. Ships can stop anywhere. International law limits interdiction authority. Flag states rarely cooperate with prosecutions. The strategic advantage favoring maritime narco-trafficking. U.S. response required coordination across unprecedented number of agencies. Navy provided platforms. Coast Guard provided law enforcement authority. DEA provided intelligence. FBI managed prosecutions. State Department negotiated with flag states. Success required all elements functioning perfectly simultaneously. November 7th proved coordinated response works when intelligence, timing, and resources align. But cartels immediately adapted again. By December 2024, new patterns emerged. Smaller transfer operations. More dispersed locations, shorter contact times between vessels, the evolution continuing despite November interdiction. Support this deep dive analysis by hitting that like button and subscribing to Warfare Signal for operational breakdowns you won't find elsewhere. The strategic lessons transformed counter-narcotics maritime doctrine. First lesson: cartels innovate faster than law enforcement adapts. Second lesson: international waters create prosecution nightmares. Third lesson: maritime domain too vast for comprehensive coverage. Fourth lesson: successful interdiction requires perfect intelligence fusion. These realities now inform U.S. counter-drug strategy. Additional resources deployed to Eastern Pacific. Fourth Fleet activated additional patrol assets. Coast Guard received funding for 2 additional Legend-class cutters. DEA Maritime Branch expanded personnel by 40%. The defensive response acknowledging offense requires persistent presence. But resource allocation favors cartels. U.S. has 32 major Coast Guard cutters covering entire Western Hemisphere. Venezuelan cartels have hundreds of fishing vessels available for smuggling. Simple mathematics favor side with more assets. Unless strategy shifts from reactive interdiction to proactive targeting. Pentagon proposed kinetic options. Strike cocaine production facilities in Venezuela. Target cartel infrastructure with precision weapons. Eliminate processing labs before drugs reach ocean. State Department rejected proposals. Military strikes violate international law. Sovereignty concerns prevent direct action. Diplomatic relationships take priority over counter-narcotics. The political constraints limiting operational options. So maritime interdiction remains primary strategy despite inherent limitations. Chase vessels across ocean, board suspicious ships, seize drugs found, prosecute when possible. The tactical approach that achieves individual successes without solving strategic problem. November 7th interdiction removed 27.3 tons from distribution network, but cartel produced 847 tons of cocaine in 2024. Interdiction rate, 3.2% of annual production. For every floating hub destroyed, how many operate undetected? That question haunts counter-narcotics planners. Floating hub operated 4 years before discovery. Similar operations might exist undiscovered. The ocean is vast, resources are limited, detection is difficult. And legal framework favors criminals operating in international waters. Quiz answer from earlier. How many successful transfers did intelligence analysts estimate occurred before November 7th interdiction? 140 operations over 4 years, moving average 30 tons each, potentially 4,200 tons of cocaine distributed with street value of $324 billion. 3 questions for you. Can maritime law evolve to address floating drug hubs? Should U.S. conduct strikes against Venezuelan production facilities? What's cartel's next innovation in maritime trafficking? The November 7th interdiction proved U.S. forces can execute complex maritime operations when intelligence provides targeting. Navy coordination, Coast Guard boarding teams, DEA investigation, FBI prosecution. All elements synchronized for single decisive strike. 27.3 tons seized, $2.1 billion denied to cartels, 340 traffickers arrested, 12 vessels captured, the tactical success showcasing American capability. But strategic reality remained unchanged. Cartels continue producing cocaine, maritime routes continue operating, floating hubs might exist undiscovered, international waters continue protecting criminal enterprises. One successful interdiction doesn't dismantle trafficking networks spanning continents and oceans. The challenge isn't capability. U.S. has ships, aircraft, and personnel to conduct interdictions. The challenge is scale. Ocean is too vast. Resources are too limited. Legal framework is too restrictive. Cartels exploit every advantage: mobile operations, international waters, jurisdictional complexity, legal ambiguity, the strategy that turns ocean into safe haven. Subscribe to Warfare Signal, where we analyze the operations shaping modern conflict. Hit that notification bell because the investigations we publish don't appear in mainstream military coverage. Venezuelan cartels continue operating today. New floating hubs established, different locations, modified procedures. Lessons learned from November 7th applied to future operations. The innovation cycle that keeps cartels one step ahead of law enforcement. U.S. forces continue patrolling. Intelligence continues monitoring. Interdictions continue when opportunities arise. The persistent effort that achieves individual victories without winning overall campaign. November 7th wasn't ending. It was engagement in longer conflict with no clear resolution. Cartels adapt. Enforcement adapts. Neither side achieves decisive advantage. The maritime narco war continues in vast Pacific waters where floating hubs appear and disappear like ghosts. Where cocaine transfers between vessels beyond legal jurisdiction. where billions in drugs move under cover of darkness while patrol aircraft search endless ocean. This is modern transnational crime, not fought in streets, but in international waters where law becomes ambiguous and enforcement becomes impossible. The floating hub that operated 4 years undetected, the interdiction that came too late, the strategic problem that has no clean solution. Warfare signal, where we expose the operations others won't touch.